You missed one line. And now the entire inheritance is mine.
The sound of Vivian's laughter cut through the mansion's silence like broken glass. I froze mid-rep on the bench press, sweat cooling on my forehead as her voice drifted down from the kitchen above. He's so pathetic, Blake. You should see him trying to work Dad's espresso machine. 20 years of marriage, and he still can't figure out the difference between a cappuccino and a latte. I set the barbell down carefully, my jaw clenching. Through the gym's ceiling speakers, part of our ridiculous smart home system, I could hear every word of her phone conversation. No, seriously, Vivian continued, her voice dripping with that particular brand of cruelty she'd perfected over the years. He thinks because he built a few strip malls that he understands real business. Dad's empire? He wouldn't last a week running it. Maybe I should have learned to spell cappuccino after all, I thought bitterly. I'd married into the Blackwood family 20 years ago, back when Vivian still pretended to find my blue-collar background charming. Her father, Richard Blackwood, had built a real estate empire worth $50 million. When he died 6 months ago, everything went to Vivian. The company, the properties, the social standing that came with the name. Everything except the respect I'd foolishly thought I'd earned. Meet me at the yacht club tomorrow, Vivian was saying. We can discuss the quarterly reports over lunch, and Blake, wear that navy suit. You know how good you look in navy. The line went dead, and I heard her heels clicking across the marble floor above. I sat there in the basement gym, surrounded by equipment that cost more than most people's cars, and felt something cold settle in my chest. Blake Summers. I knew that name. Trust fund brat, worked as some kind of private art dealer, always hanging around the country club with his perfectly styled hair and his Princeton smile. I'd seen him talking to Vivian at charity events, noticed how she laughed a little too hard at his jokes. I climbed the stairs slowly, my mind racing. The kitchen was empty, but Vivian's laptop sat open on the granite counter. She'd always been careless with technology, another thing she looked down on me for understanding better than her. The email was right there in her inbox, sent just an hour ago. Can't wait to see you tomorrow. These charity weekends are the only thing keeping me sane. Your husband suspects nothing? B. My hands shook as I scrolled through their correspondence. Months of messages going back to just after her father's funeral. Photos attached, Vivian and Blake at restaurants I'd never been to, at his waterfront estate, at hotels in Boston and New York during her supposed business trips. In one photo, Blake was wearing my tennis whites. The irony wasn't lost on me. Not a good color on him. I heard Vivian's footsteps on the stairs and quickly closed the laptop. She swept into the kitchen wearing a black cocktail dress I'd bought her for our anniversary last year. Going somewhere? I asked, proud of how steady my voice sounded. Sophie's having a dinner party. I told you about it. She didn't look at me as she grabbed her purse from the counter. Don't wait up. Sophie, Vivian's oldest friend, a pill-popping socialite who lived for gossip and drama. I'd bet money that Sophie's dinner party was just cover for another rendezvous with Blake. Vivian, I said quietly, we need to talk. She turned, one perfectly sculpted eyebrow raised. About what, Elliot? Your latest construction project? I really don't have time. About Blake Summers? The color drained from her face for just a moment before that familiar mask of superiority slid back into place. What about him? I know about the emails, the photos, the charity weekends that aren't actually charity weekends. She laughed. That same cutting sound I'd heard through the speakers. Oh, Elliot, you always were paranoid. Blake is a friend, a business associate. Just because you don't understand sophisticated relationships... Sophisticated? I stepped closer, and for the first time in years, I saw something flicker in her eyes. Fear. Is that what we're calling adultery now? Adultery? Her voice rose to a shriek. You think I'd waste my time cheating with Blake when I have to come home to this every night? She gestured at me dismissively. Look at yourself, Elliot. Look at this pathetic blue-collar tantrum you're throwing. You're embarrassing yourself. I want him gone, Vivian. Out of our lives now. She stepped closer, her eyes cold as winter. Or what? You'll divorce me? Take half of everything? She laughed again. Darling, you signed a prenup. A very thorough prenup. You get nothing. Less than nothing. And if you try to make trouble for me, I'll make sure everyone in this town knows exactly what kind of man you really are. What's that supposed to mean? It means I have friends, Elliot. Important friends. And they'll believe whatever I tell them about your temper, your drinking, your tendencies toward violence. Her smile was poison. Who do you think they'll believe? The grieving widow trying to honor her father's legacy, or the angry construction worker who married above his station? She brushed past me toward the door, then paused. Oh, and Elliot? Tomorrow we're meeting with Graham to finalize the inheritance paperwork. Dad's company becomes officially mine. Try not to embarrass me in front of the lawyers. The door slammed behind her, leaving me alone in our pristine kitchen with its restaurant-grade appliances and its view of perfectly manicured grounds. Everything in this house was beautiful, expensive, and cold as ice, just like my wife. The next morning, I sat in Graham Whitmore's law office, watching Vivian sign document after document with flourish. Graham had been the Blackwood family lawyer for 30 years, a thin man with wire-rimmed glasses who'd never liked me much. And with this final signature, Graham said, Blackwood Properties is officially transferred to Mrs. Parrish's sole ownership. Vivian smiled triumphantly. Thank you, Graham. I know Daddy would be proud. Actually, Graham said, reaching into his desk drawer, there is one more thing. Your father left this for Mr. Parrish specifically. I was instructed to give it to him only after the main inheritance was settled. He handed me a dusty manila envelope with my name written on it in Richard Blackwood's distinctive handwriting. Inside was a single sheet of paper with a bank account number and routing information, along with one line of text. For the son I never had. Use it wisely. RB. What is it? Vivian demanded, trying to snatch the paper from my hands. I folded it carefully and put it in my pocket. Nothing important, but my heart was racing. That afternoon, I drove to the bank and checked the account. The balance made me sit down hard in the parking lot. $5 million. That night, I sat in my home office, the one room in the house that was truly mine, and stared at the bank statement. Richard Blackwood had never been warm to me, but he'd been fair. More than fair, apparently. A slow smile spread across my face as I opened my laptop and began making some calls. Vivian thought she held all the cards, thought she could humiliate me and cast me aside like yesterday's garbage. She was about to learn that her blue-collar husband had picked up a few tricks over the years. Looks like Daddy liked me more than his own daughter, I thought. The game was just beginning. The Harbor Light pub sat on the wrong side of town, a deliberate choice. I'd bought it 5 years ago as an investment, but it had become something more, a place where real people gathered, where information flowed as freely as the beer. Sharon McKenzie, the pub's manager and my most trusted friend, slid a coffee across the scarred wooden bar. You look like heck, Elliot. Feel worse. I took a sip of the coffee. Strong enough to wake the dead, nothing like the fancy espresso machine at home. I need a favor, Sharon. A big one. Name it. I'd known Sharon for 15 years, ever since she'd worked as a dispatcher for the police department. She had connections throughout the city, an ear for gossip, and a bulldog's instinct for sniffing out lies. I need information on Blake Summers. Everything you can dig up, and I need it done quietly. Sharon's weathered face creased into a knowing smile. Finally figured out what your wife's been up to? You knew? Honey, everyone knows. That boy's been bragging about his conquest to anyone who'll listen. Sophie's been spreading it around the yacht club like butter on toast. The betrayal hit me fresh, knowing that my humiliation was public knowledge. But anger was better than self-pity. What can you tell me? Blake's got a reputation. 3 ex-wives, all of them left him broke. He's got gambling debts up to his eyeballs and a taste for expensive things he can't afford. Sharon leaned closer. Word is he owes Tommy Ritchie about 50 grand from poker games. Tommy Ritchie ran the only high-stakes game in town. Not someone you wanted to owe money to. There's more, Sharon continued. Blake's been seen around town with other women. Married women. Your wife isn't his only side project. I felt my hands clench into fists. Who else? Margaret Ashford, for one. Her husband found out last month, nearly divorced her over it. Margaret Ashford was the mayor's wife, a woman in her 50s who'd always struck me as desperately unhappy. If Blake was working multiple angles, I need more than gossip, Sharon. I need proof. She nodded toward the back booth where a stocky man with graying hair sat nursing a beer. Mick Sullivan. Used to be a cop. Now he runs a security consulting business. Does background checks, surveillance, that kind of thing. All legal, all admissible. I'd met Mick a few times over the years. Good man, honest, with a dry sense of humor and a reputation for thoroughness. Mick, I said, sliding into the booth across from him. I need help. He looked up from his beer, studying my face. Wife trouble. How'd you guess? 20 years on the force teaches you to read people. Plus, Sharon filled me in on the basics. He leaned back. What do you need? I need to know everything about Blake Summers. His finances, his relationships, his habits, and I need it documented. That's going to cost you. I thought about the $5 million sitting in my secret account. Money's not a problem. All right then, give me a week. 3 days later, my phone rang at 6 in the morning. Meet me at the yacht club, Mick said, and bring a camera. The Millfield Yacht Club was the crown jewel of our small city's elite social scene. I'd never felt comfortable there, despite being a member for nearly 2 decades. The other members tolerated me because of Vivian's name, but I'd always been the outsider looking in. This morning, that was going to work in my favor. I found Mick in the parking lot, sitting in his pickup truck with a telephoto lens pointed at the marina. Your boy Blake's got a routine, Mick said. Every Tuesday and Friday morning, he takes his yacht out for what he calls business meetings. Except he's not alone. Through the lens, I could see Blake's pristine white yacht, the easy money. A woman in a red dress was climbing aboard. Not Vivian, someone I didn't recognize. That's Jennifer Walsh, Mick said. Married to the bank president. Blake's been seeing her for about 6 months. I watched Blake help Jennifer onto the boat, his hands lingering on her waist, the same hands that had been all over my wife. There's more, Mick continued. Blake's been using these boat trips to move money around. Offshore accounts, cash transactions. I can't prove it's illegal, but it's definitely shady. What kind of money? The kind that comes from desperate housewives looking to hide assets from their husbands. The pieces were falling into place. Blake wasn't just a serial adulterer. He was running a sophisticated con game targeting wealthy married women and helping them hide money in exchange for services. I want to get closer, I said. Mick looked at me skeptically. That's not a good idea, Elliot. If he sees you, he won't, trust me. I walked down to the marina, my heart pounding. The dock was slippery from the morning dew, and I moved carefully along the weathered planks. Blake's yacht was moored at the end of the pier, its engines already running. I could hear voices from the cabin, Blake's smooth tenor and Jennifer's nervous laughter. They were discussing account numbers, transfer amounts, the kind of financial details that would be very interesting to Jennifer's husband. The Cayman account is completely secure, Blake was saying. Your husband will never find it, and even if he does, he can't touch it without your signature. You're sure about this? Jennifer sounded worried. Baby, trust me. I've done this for dozens of women. You deserve to have something of your own, something he can't control. I was recording everything on my phone when Blake emerged from the cabin. He was wearing deck shoes with smooth soles, and the morning dew had made the deck treacherous. I didn't plan what happened next. I was backing away from the boat when Blake stepped onto the dock, looking right at me. Hey, he shouted. What the heck are you doing here? He rushed toward me, but his expensive deck shoes had no grip on the wet planks. His feet went out from under him, and he tumbled sideways into the marina with a tremendous splash. Oh no, I said loudly, making sure Jennifer could hear me. Are you okay? Those docks can be treacherous when you're not careful. Blake surfaced, sputtering and furious, his $10,000 suit ruined. You son of a witch! You did that on purpose. Did what? I asked innocently. I was just walking by when you slipped. Maybe you should invest in better shoes. Jennifer appeared at the boat's rail, looking mortified. Other yacht club members were starting to gather, drawn by the commotion. Here, I said, extending my hand to help Blake out of the water. Let me give you a hand. Blake slapped my hand away and hauled himself onto the dock, dripping and humiliated. His carefully styled hair was plastered to his head, and his expensive suit was covered in marina scum. This isn't over, he hissed. I smiled. I certainly hope not. Watching a man worth millions go fishing for his dignity in the mud, priceless. That evening I was in my home office when Vivian burst through the door, her face flushed with rage. What did you do to Blake? I helped him out of the water, I said mildly. Seemed like the neighborly thing to do. Don't play games with me, Elliot. He said you were spying on him. I was at the yacht club. Last I checked, I'm still a member. She slammed her hand on my desk. Stay away from him. I'm warning you. Or what? You'll make more threats about my temper, my drinking? I leaned back in my chair. Funny thing about threats, Vivian. They only work if people believe them. What's that supposed to mean? It means I've been doing some research of my own. Did you know Blake owes Tommy Ricci $50,000? Or that he's been running the same con on half a dozen other wives in town? The color drained from her face. You're lying. Jennifer Walsh, Margaret Ashford, Susan Chen. Should I go on? I opened my desk drawer and pulled out a folder thick with photographs and documents. Your boyfriend's been busy? Vivian grabbed for the folder, but I pulled it away. Here's what's going to happen, I said quietly. You're going to end it with Blake. Tonight, and you're going to do it publicly so there's no misunderstanding. I won't. Then I guess Jennifer's husband will be very interested in these photos of her and Blake discussing offshore accounts. And Margaret's husband. And Susan's. You bastard. I learned from the best. She stormed out, but I could see the fear in her eyes. For the first time in our marriage, I held the cards. My phone rang an hour later. It was my lawyer. Elliot, we have a problem. Vivian's filed papers to freeze all your joint accounts. She's claiming you're mentally unstable and pose a financial risk. I smiled grimly. Let her try. I've got resources she doesn't know about. What kind of resources? The kind that her dear old dad left me. Don't worry, counselor. Let's see how she likes what's coming. The war was escalating, but I was ready for battle. The law office of Whitmore, Blackwood, and Associates felt different this time. Where I'd once sat quietly while Vivian inherited her father's empire, now I occupied the chair across from Graham's desk like I owned it. I'm afraid Mrs. Parrish has been quite insistent, Graham was saying, his thin fingers drumming nervously on his mahogany desk. She wants to invoke the mental incapacity clause in your prenuptial agreement. Mental incapacity? I kept my voice level, though inside I was seething. Based on what? She claims you've been behaving erratically, following her, harassing her friends, making threats. Graham wouldn't meet my eyes. She has witnesses. Sophie and Blake, I assume? Among others. I leaned forward. Graham, you've known me for 20 years. Do I seem mentally incapacitated to you? Well, no, but then here's what we're going to do. I slid a document across his desk. I'm liquidating some assets, personal assets that have nothing to do with my wife or her family's money. Graham's eyebrows shot up as he read the paperwork. These are substantial assets, Elliot. I had no idea you had this kind of liquidity. There are a lot of things about me people don't know. I stood up. I want those cars sold by the end of the week, and I want the proceeds donated to the Millfield Children's Hospital. In my name. Your name? Not jointly with Mrs. Parrish? Just mine. Make sure there's a press release. Graham looked confused, but he nodded. If that's what you want. It is. And Graham, if my wife tries to freeze any more accounts, you'll find I have resources she's not aware of. Resources that don't require her permission. I left him staring at the paperwork, his mouth slightly open. The next morning, the local newspaper ran a front-page story. Local businessman donates $500,000 to Children's Hospital. The article featured a photo of me shaking hands with the hospital administrator, surrounded by sick children who would benefit from the new equipment my donation would buy. My phone started ringing before 8 a.m. What the heck do you think you're doing? Vivian's voice was shrill with rage. Charity work, I said mildly. You're always saying I should be more involved in the community. That was our money. Actually, it was my money, from cars I owned before we were married. But thanks for confirming what this is really about. You're trying to make me look bad. I'm trying to help sick children. If that makes you look bad, maybe you should examine your priorities. She hung up on me, but the damage was done. By noon, I'd received calls from 3 different charity organizations asking if I'd consider similar donations. The social pages were buzzing with praise for my generosity. Meanwhile, Vivian looked like a selfish shrew for trying to stop me. That afternoon, I met Mick at the Harbor Light. Sharon poured us both coffee while Mick spread photos across the bar. Your wife's boyfriend has been busy, Mick said. 3 more women this week. He's got a real system going. The photos showed Blake with various women at expensive restaurants, hotels, and private clubs. Always the same pattern. Older women, married, wealthy, and clearly infatuated. Here's the interesting part, Mick continued. Blake's been liquidating art. Expensive pieces, sold through private dealers. Word is, he's trying to raise cash fast. For Tommy Ritchie? That's my guess. And if he can't pay? Mick shrugged. Let's just say Tommy's not known for his patience. An idea was forming in my mind. A delicious, perfect idea. Sharon, what do you know about the monthly art auction at the Whitmore Gallery? It's this Saturday. Big social event. All the rich folks show up to bid on overpriced paintings and feel cultured. She grinned. Why? Because I think it's time I developed an interest in art. Saturday evening, the Whitmore Gallery was packed with Millfield's elite. I arrived fashionably late, wearing my best suit and a confident smile. Vivian was there, of course, sitting in the front row next to Blake. She looked stunning in a black cocktail dress, but her face was tight with stress. Blake looked worse. His usually perfect appearance was slightly disheveled, and I could see sweat beading on his forehead despite the gallery's air conditioning. A man under pressure. The auctioneer, a greasy little man named Dorsey, was in his element. Ladies and gentlemen, our next item is a stunning piece by local artist Miranda Blackwood, a landscape of Millfield Harbor, oil on canvas, donated by the Blackwood estate. I recognized the painting. It had hung in Richard Blackwood's study for years. Vivian must have decided to sell it. Bidding starts at $5,000, Dorsey announced. Blake's hand shot up immediately. 5,000! 6,000! Called a voice from the back. Blake turned, his face darkening when he saw me. 7,000! I smiled and raised my paddle. 10,000! A murmur went through the crowd. Blake's jaw clenched. 15,000! 20,000, I said calmly. Blake was sweating now. He leaned over to whisper something to Vivian, who looked mortified. The painting was worth maybe 8,000 at most. 25,000, Blake called out, his voice cracking slightly. 50,000. The gallery fell silent. Blake stared at me, his face pale. He whispered urgently to Vivian again, but she shook her head. 50,000 going once, Dorsey said, barely able to contain his excitement. Going twice is sold to Mr. Parrish. The crowd erupted in applause, but I wasn't done. Ladies and gentlemen, I said, standing up, I'd like to make an announcement. This painting will be donated to the Millfield Museum of Art, where everyone in our community can enjoy it. Art shouldn't be hoarded by private collectors. It should be shared. More applause, even louder this time. I caught sight of Vivian's face, twisted with rage and humiliation. Blake looked like he was going to be sick. As the crowd began to disperse, Blake cornered me near the gallery's exit. You son of a witch, he hissed. You did that on purpose. Did what? Participated in a charity auction? Donated art to the museum? I shrugged. I'm just trying to be a good citizen. You're trying to humiliate me. Blake, I don't need to try. You're doing a fine job of that yourself. I leaned closer. How much do you owe Tommy Ricci these days? 60,000. 70? His face went white. How did you... I know a lot of things, like how you've been conning married women out of their money, how you've been using Vivian to legitimize your little operation. I smiled coldly. Did you really think you could play games in my town without me finding out? This isn't over. No, I agreed. It's not. Blake pushed past me and stalked out of the gallery, leaving Vivian to face the crowd alone. She was surrounded by well-wishers praising my generosity, forced to smile and nod while her world crumbled around her. It was a beautiful sight. The next morning, I was reading the newspaper's glowing coverage of the auction when my phone rang. It was Sophie, Vivian's pill-addled friend. Elliot, we need to talk. About what, Sophie? About Vivian. About Blake. About the mess they've gotten themselves into. Her voice was slurred. Too many mimosas with breakfast, probably. Meet me at the yacht club in an hour. I found Sophie on the club's terrace, clutching a Bloody Mary and looking like she hadn't slept in days. Her usually perfect appearance was disheveled, her makeup smudged. You're destroying her, she said without preamble. I'm not doing anything to her that she hasn't done to herself. Blake's in trouble. Real trouble. If he can't pay his debts, that's not my problem. Sophie leaned forward, her eyes desperate. He's threatening to expose everything. All the women he's been working with, all the money he's helped them hide, including Vivian. What money? The trust fund? Vivian's been moving money out of her father's trust into offshore accounts. Blake's been helping her hide it from the IRS. Sophie's hands were shaking. If this comes out, she'll lose everything. She might even go to prison. I felt a cold satisfaction settle in my chest. And you're telling me this because I know you still love her. Somewhere deep down, you don't want to see her destroyed. I looked out at the harbor, where Blake's yacht sat at anchor. The easy money looked smaller somehow, less impressive in the harsh morning light. You're wrong, Sophie. I don't love her anymore. I don't even like her. Then what do you want? I turned back to face her, and she flinched at whatever she saw in my eyes. I want justice. I want her to understand what it feels like to lose everything. To be humiliated, betrayed, cast aside like garbage? I stood up. And I want her to know that the blue-collar husband she looked down on was the one who brought her down. Sophie started to cry, black mascara running down her cheeks. You're not the man I thought you were. No, I agreed, I'm not. That afternoon, I got a call from Sharon. You need to get down here, she said now. I found her at the harbor light, surrounded by printouts and photographs. Her face was grim. Sophie came by an hour ago, drunk as a skunk and mad as heck. She left these behind. The papers were screenshots of text messages between Vivian, Blake, and Sophie. Plans to frame me for domestic misuse, fake photos they'd staged, witness statements they'd coached. They were going to destroy you, Sharon said quietly. Make it look like you'd been beating Vivian, threatening her. They had it all planned out. I stared at the evidence, feeling something cold and final settle in my chest. Any lingering affection I'd had for my wife died in that moment. They have no idea what they've started, I said. What are you going to do? I looked up at Sharon, and she stepped back at what she saw in my face. I'm going to finish it. The smart home system I'd installed 3 years ago had been Vivian's idea. She'd wanted to be able to control everything from her phone to impress her friends with our high-tech lifestyle. Now, as I sat in my office reviewing the system's capabilities, I realized she'd handed me the perfect tool. Every door, every light, every camera, every electronic lock in the house could be controlled remotely. The garage, the wine cellar, even the panic room we'd never used. All of it connected to a system that only I fully understood. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. We need to talk. Meet me at your house tonight, 9 p.m., come alone. Blake. I smiled. Perfect. At 8:30, I was waiting in my office when the motion sensors detected Blake's car pulling into the driveway. I watched through the security cameras as he parked next to my pickup truck, looking around nervously before approaching the front door. I let him ring the doorbell twice before activating the intercom. Blake, right on time. Where's Vivian? His voice crackled through the speaker. Not here, just you and me, like you wanted. I triggered the front door lock. Come in, we have a lot to discuss. Through the cameras, I watched him enter the foyer, his expensive shoes clicking on the marble floor. He was trying to project confidence, but I could see the tension in his shoulders, the way his eyes darted around looking for threats. I'm in the office, I called out. Down the hall, last door on the right. But as Blake walked toward my voice, I was already moving through the house's back corridors, using my knowledge of the layout to stay ahead of him. When he reached the office and found it empty, I was positioned behind him in the hallway. Looking for me? I said quietly. He spun around, his face pale. Jesus, Elliot, you scared me. Did I? That's interesting. Why would you be scared? Blake straightened his tie, trying to regain his composure. We need to discuss this situation like civilized men. Civilized? I laughed. Like planning to frame me for domestic misuse? That kind of civilized? His face went white. I don't know what you're talking about. Sophie left some interesting documents at the harbor light today. Screenshots of text messages. Photos used staged to make it look like I'd hurt Vivian. Very creative work. Blake's hand moved toward his jacket pocket, but I was faster. I grabbed his wrist, squeezing until he gasped. Looking for your phone? Planning to call for help? I increased the pressure. Here's the thing, Blake. This house is a fortress. Soundproofed walls, reinforced doors, and a security system that only I control. Nobody's coming to save you. I released his wrist and stepped back. Let's continue this conversation somewhere more private. I guided him toward the garage, keeping myself between him and any exit. The 3-car garage was my domain, filled with tools, equipment, and the hydraulic car lift I used for maintenance. Nice setup, Blake said, trying to sound casual. Is that your Mustang? 1967, Shelby GT 500, restored it myself. I walked over to the control panel for the car lift. But you're not here to admire my cars, are you? Elliot, listen. I hit the button and the lift began to rise with a mechanical whir. Blake's eyes widened as his own BMW, the one he'd driven here tonight, was lifted 8 feet off the ground. Impressive system, I said conversationally. Can lift 4,000 pounds without breaking a sweat. Of course, what goes up? I let the sentence hang in the air. Blake was sweating now, his carefully styled hair beginning to wilt. What do you want? I want you to understand something. You came into my town, seduced my wife, and thought you could destroy me without consequences. I stepped closer. You were wrong. I never meant for it to go this far. Shut up! My voice cut through his protest like a blade. You're going to listen to me very carefully. You're going to end your relationship with my wife. Tonight. Publicly. And you're going to leave town. I can't just leave. I have business here, obligations. You have debts. $75,000 to Tommy Ricci, to be exact. Plus whatever you owe to the other bookies, the credit card companies, the IRS. I pulled out my phone and showed him a detailed financial report. Mick's very thorough. Blake stared at the screen, his face crumbling. How did you get this? I told you, I know everything, including how you've been using my wife to legitimize your con games, how you've been helping her hide money from the tax authorities, how you plan to frame me and take over her father's company. We weren't. Don't lie to me. My voice echoed off the garage walls. I have recordings of you and Jennifer Walsh discussing offshore accounts, photos of you with half a dozen other women, bank records showing suspicious transfers. I hit another button on the control panel, and the garage door began to close with a grinding rumble. Blake looked around frantically as his escape route disappeared. Here's what's going to happen, I continued. You're going to call Vivian right now and end it. You're going to tell her you're leaving town and she'll never see you again, and you're going to do it convincingly. And if I refuse, I gestured toward his suspended BMW, then I accidentally hit the wrong button, your car gets crushed, and you have to explain to Tommy Ricci why you can't make your payment because you're stuck in my garage. Blake's hands were shaking as he pulled out his phone. You're insane. No, I'm thorough. There's a difference. I crossed my arms. Make the call. He dialed with trembling fingers. I could hear Vivian's voice when she answered, sharp and suspicious. Blake, where are you? You were supposed to meet me an hour ago. Vivian, we need to talk. What's wrong? You sound strange. Blake looked at me desperately, but I just stared back impassively. I'm leaving town, he said finally. Tonight. It's over between us. What? Blake, what are you talking about? I can't do this anymore. The pressure, the lies, the constant fear of getting caught. I'm done. You can't just leave me. We have plans. We have nothing. Blake's voice cracked. It was all a mistake, a stupid, selfish mistake that's going to destroy both of us if we don't end it now. There was silence on the other end of the line, then Vivian's voice, cold and deadly. If you walk away from me now, I'll destroy you. I'll tell everyone about the money, about the other women, about everything. Blake looked at me, and I nodded encouragingly. Go ahead, he said quietly. Destroy me. But I'm still leaving. He hung up and dropped the phone on the concrete floor. There. Are you satisfied? Not quite. I walked over to the car lift controls. You see, Blake, I don't trust you. Men like you don't keep their word unless they have no other choice. I hit the emergency release button. The lift shuddered and dropped 6 inches before the safety catches engaged, leaving Blake's BMW swaying precariously. Blake jumped back, his face white with terror. Jesus Christ! You could have seriously hurt me. The safety systems work perfectly. This time, I stepped closer. But accidents happen, don't they? Mechanical failures, human error. It would be terrible if something happened to your car while you were standing underneath it. You're threatening me. I'm educating you. You wanted to play games in my town. With my wife. With my life. Now you get to learn the rules. I pulled out an envelope thick with cash, $10,000 from my secret account. Here's your severance pay, enough to get out of town and make a dent in what you owe Tommy. Blake stared at the money like it was a snake. What's the catch? No catch, just a gift from one businessman to another. Consider it a professional courtesy. He took the envelope with shaking hands. Why? Because I want you gone more than I want you dead. And because when Vivian realizes you took money to leave her, it's going to destroy her more than anything I could do. Understanding dawned in Blake's eyes. You bastard. I learned from the best. I hit the button to raise the garage door. Your car will be down in a few minutes. I suggest you use that time to pack. Blake walked toward the opening garage door, then turned back. She really loved you, you know. Before all this started, she used to talk about you, about how proud she was of what you'd built, how much she respected your strength. And then her father died, and she decided she didn't need me anymore. I shrugged. People change. Or maybe they just show who they really were all along. What happens now? I smiled, and Blake took an involuntary step backward. Now, she gets to find out what it feels like to be betrayed by someone she trusted. To be abandoned, humiliated, and left with nothing. Blake nodded slowly. You're going to destroy her? No, I said quietly. I'm going to let her destroy herself. I'm just providing the opportunity. After Blake left, I sat in my office and waited. It didn't take long. Vivian burst through the front door at 11:30, her face streaked with tears and makeup. She found me in the kitchen, calmly eating a sandwich. What did you do to him? She screamed. I had a conversation with him, man to man. He's gone. He packed up and left town. Said he couldn't handle the pressure anymore. Sounds like he made a smart decision. She slapped me across the face, the sound echoing through the kitchen. I didn't flinch. You destroyed everything. He was the only good thing in my miserable life, and you drove him away. Actually, I think you'll find he left of his own free will. In fact, he seemed quite eager to go. I don't believe you. I pulled out my phone and played a recording of Blake's phone call. Vivian's face crumbled as she heard his voice, heard him calling their relationship a mistake. He used you, I said quietly. Just like he used Jennifer Walsh, Margaret Ashford, and all the others, you were just another mark in his con game. That's not true. He took $10,000 to leave you, cash. Couldn't get out of town fast enough once he had it. Vivian staggered backward as if I'd hit her. You're lying. I showed her a photo on my phone. Blake counting the money in my garage, his face eager and greedy. The man you thought loved you sold you out for 10 grand. What does that tell you about your worth to him? She collapsed into a chair, sobbing. For a moment, I almost felt sorry for her. Almost. Why? She whispered. Why are you doing this to me? Because you tried to destroy me first. Because you looked down on me, betrayed me, and thought I was too stupid to fight back. I knelt down beside her chair. Because you forgot that I built everything I have from nothing. And I know how to tear things down just as well as I know how to build them up. She looked up at me with red, swollen eyes. I hate you. Good, I said. Now, you know how I felt. The war was far from over, but I'd won the first major battle. Blake was gone, Vivian was broken, and I was just getting started. Tomorrow, the real fun would begin. The next morning brought news that spread through Millfield's social circles like wildfire. Blake Summers had been found at the bus station at 3 a.m., trying to leave town with 2 suitcases and a duffel bag full of cash. Tommy Ricci's men had been waiting for him. Sharon called me at dawn with the details. They didn't hurt him bad, just roughed him up a little. But they took every penny he had, including that 10 grand you gave him. Shame, I said, not feeling sorry at all. There's more. Blake's desperate now. Word is he's trying to get back in Vivian's good graces, claiming you forced him to leave. I'd expected this. Men like Blake never stayed down when they could drag others down with them. Where is he now? Holed up at the Riverside Motel. Vivian's been seen going in and out. Looks like they're planning something. I spent the morning making preparations. The secret account Richard Blackwood had left me was about to serve its final purpose. At noon, I walked into Graham Whitmore's office carrying a briefcase full of documents. Elliot, Graham said nervously, I wasn't expecting you. I have some information you need to see. About the Blackwood Trust? I spread the papers across his desk, bank records, transfer receipts, offshore account statements. Graham's face went pale as he read. Where did you get these? Richard Blackwood was more thorough than anyone realized. He kept records of every transaction, every transfer, every penny that moved through the trust. I pointed to a series of highlighted entries, including the $3 million Vivian moved to the Cayman Islands over the past 6 months. This is embezzlement, tax evasion. If the IRS sees this, they won't see it from me, but they might see it from someone else. I leaned forward. Someone who's desperate enough to trade information for immunity. Graham's hands were shaking. Blake knows about the offshore accounts. He helped set them up, and right now he's broke, desperate, and looking for a way to save himself. I gathered up the papers. How long do you think it'll be before he decides to cut a deal with the authorities? What do you want, Elliot? I want justice, and I want it served publicly in front of everyone who ever looked down on me. That afternoon, I made a call to the one person in town who could help me orchestrate the perfect finale. Mrs. Cobb, it's Elliot Parrish. I need to ask you a favor. Edith Cobb was 83 years old, lived next door to the mansion, and knew every secret in Millfield. She'd been watching the neighborhood drama unfold with the keen interest of a born gossip. What kind of favor, dear? I need you to make some phone calls, spread some information. Can you do that for me? Oh, I think I can manage that. By evening, half of Millfield knew that Blake Summers was back in town and that he and Vivian were planning something desperate. The other half knew that federal investigators were asking questions about offshore banking and tax evasion. The stage was set for the final act. At 8 p.m., my phone rang. It was Vivian. "We need to meet," she said. Her voice was different, harder, more desperate than I'd ever heard it. "About what?" "About ending this. Blake and I have a proposition for you." "I'm listening." "The old Riverside warehouse, 9 o'clock. Come alone." The Riverside warehouse sat on the edge of town, a relic from Millfield's industrial past. It had been abandoned for years, its broken windows and rusted walls a monument to economic decline. I arrived early and positioned myself where I could see the entire building. Mick was parked across the street in his pickup truck, ready to call for help if needed. Vivian and Blake arrived together in her Mercedes, their headlights cutting through the darkness. They looked nervous, desperate, exactly where I wanted them. I waited until they were inside before making my entrance. "Touching reunion," I said, stepping out of the shadows. "I thought Blake had left town for good." "Plans change," Blake said. He looked terrible. Bruised face, wrinkled clothes, the desperate air of a man with nothing left to lose. "What do you want?" I asked. Vivian stepped forward. "We want to make a deal." "I'm listening." "Blake knows about the offshore accounts, about the money I moved out of the trust." Her voice was steady, but I could see the fear in her eyes. "He's threatened to go to the authorities unless..." "Unless what?" "Unless you give us $5 million. I laughed, a genuine, delighted sound that echoed through the empty warehouse. "You're trying to blackmail me? With my own wife's crimes?" "It's not blackmail," Blake said quickly. "It's a business proposition. You pay us, we disappear, and everyone's happy. Everyone except the IRS, the federal prosecutors, and the dozen other women you've been conning." I shook my head. "You really don't understand what's happening here, do you?" "What do you mean?" Vivian asked. I pulled out my phone and played a recording. Blake's voice, clear as day, explaining to Jennifer Walsh how to hide assets from the government. "I've been recording everything for months. Every conversation, every meeting, every crime you've committed." I smiled. "I don't need to pay you anything. I already have everything I need to destroy you both." Blake lunged at me, but I was ready. I sidestepped his clumsy attack and watched him crash into a stack of empty crates. "You're making this too easy," I said. Vivian was backing toward the door, her face white with terror. "You can't do this. I'm your wife. You were my wife. Now you're just another criminal who made the mistake of underestimating me." Sirens wailed in the distance, growing closer. Blake struggled to his feet, a crimson trickle from his nose. "You called the cops?" "I didn't have to. Mrs. Cobb mentioned to her friend Margaret that she'd seen suspicious activity at the warehouse. Margaret told her husband, the bank president, who called the police." I shrugged. "Small-town gossip. It spreads like wildfire." The warehouse doors burst open, and police officers flooded in with tools drawn. Behind them came federal agents in dark suits, their faces grim and professional. "Elliot Parrish?" One of the agents approached me. "Agent Morrison, FBI. We understand you have information about financial crimes." I handed him a thick folder. "Everything you need is in there. Bank records, recordings, witness statements. It's all documented." Vivian screamed as the handcuffs clicked around her wrists. "You bastard! You planned this whole thing!" "From the moment I found those emails," I confirmed. "Every move you made, every decision you thought was yours, I've been guiding you toward this moment." Blake was fighting the officers, screaming about frame-ups and conspiracies. Nobody was listening. "The offshore accounts," Agent Morrison said, flipping through the documents. "How did you obtain this information?" "Richard Blackwood kept meticulous records. He suspected his daughter was stealing from the trust, so he documented everything." I smiled. He left the evidence to me in his will, along with instructions on what to do with it. It wasn't entirely true, but it was close enough. Richard had suspected Vivian's greed, and he had left me the means to stop her. As they led Vivian away, she turned back to me one last time. "I loved you," she said. "Once upon a time, I really loved you." "I know," I replied. "But love wasn't enough for you, was it? You wanted more. You always wanted more." The warehouse emptied slowly, leaving me alone with the echoes of my victory. 20 years of marriage, 20 years of being looked down upon and underestimated had led to this moment. I walked outside to find a crowd gathered. Neighbors, reporters, curiosity seekers drawn by the commotion. They stared at me with new respect, new understanding of what the quiet construction worker had been capable of all along. Mick appeared at my side. "How do you feel?" I looked up at the stars, visible now through the clear night air, and felt something I hadn't experienced in years. Peace. I feel free. The next morning, I stood on the mansion's balcony with a cup of coffee, watching the circus unfold below. News vans lined the street, reporters interviewed neighbors, and photographers captured every angle of the house where it all began. Mrs. Cobb waved at me from her garden, a satisfied smile on her weathered face. She'd become something of a local celebrity overnight, the observant neighbor who'd helped bring down a criminal conspiracy. My phone had been ringing all morning. Lawyers, reporters, old friends who suddenly wanted to reconnect. I'd ignored most of the calls, but there was one I had to take. "Mr. Parrish, this is District Attorney Sarah Chen. I wanted to thank you personally for your cooperation in this case. Just doing my civic duty. Your evidence is going to put both Blake Summers and your wife away for a very long time. Financial fraud, tax evasion, conspiracy, we're looking at 15 to 20 years minimum. What about the other women Blake was working with? Most of them are cooperating in exchange for reduced sentences. They were victims as much as accomplices." She paused. "There is one thing. Your wife's lawyer is claiming you entrapped her, that you orchestrated everything to frame her." I laughed. "Let him try to prove that. Every crime she committed of her own free will. I just made sure there was evidence." "That's what I thought. We'll be in touch if we need anything else." After hanging up, I walked through the mansion's empty rooms. Without Vivian's presence, the house felt different. Larger, somehow, and infinitely more peaceful. The expensive furniture and artwork that had once intimidated me now seemed like props in a play that was finally over. In the kitchen, I found a note that had been slipped under the door. "Mr. Parrish, thank you for everything. Blake destroyed my marriage, but at least now there's justice. Jennifer Walsh." Similar notes had been arriving all morning. Margaret Ashford, Susan Chen, half a dozen other women who'd been Blake's victims. They were grateful, they said, that someone had finally stood up to him. I was reading through them when Sharon arrived, carrying a bottle of champagne and wearing a huge grin. "Thought we should celebrate," she said, popping the cork. "The Harbor Light's been packed all morning with people wanting to hear the story." "What story is that?" "About how the quiet construction worker took down the town's elite criminals. About how the underdog won." She poured 2 glasses. "You're a folk hero, Elliot." "I'm not a hero. I'm just a man who got tired of being stepped on. Same thing sometimes." We drank in comfortable silence, watching the media circus through the kitchen windows. "What happens now?" Sharon asked. "Now I rebuild. Differently this time, but better." "Any regrets?" I thought about Vivian, probably sitting in a federal holding cell, her perfect world crumbling around her. I thought about Blake, facing decades in prison for his crimes. I thought about the life I'd had and the life I was about to begin. "None," I said finally. That afternoon, I drove to the Harbor Light for what had become an impromptu celebration. The pub was packed with people I'd known for years. Construction workers, shop owners, teachers, nurses. Real people with real jobs who'd watched the morning's events with satisfaction. "Speech!" someone called out as I entered. "Speech! Speech!" The chant was taken up by others. I climbed onto a chair, looking out at faces I'd known for decades. These were my people, the ones who'd never looked down on me for my background or my lack of pretension. "I'm not much of a speaker," I began, "but I want to say something about justice." The room fell quiet. For 20 years, I watched people in this town get away with things because they had money, because they had connections, because they thought they were untouchable. My voice grew stronger. I watched them look down on working people, treat us like we were invisible or stupid or beneath their notice. Nods and murmurs of agreement rippled through the crowd. Well, they were wrong. We see everything. We remember everything. And when the time comes, we act. I raise my glass. To justice, to truth, and to the understanding that in America, nobody is above the law. The roar of approval was deafening. Later that evening, I was back at the mansion when a car pulled into the driveway. I recognized the driver, Graham Whitmore, looking older and more tired than I'd ever seen him. "Elliot," he said as I met him at the door, We need to talk. I led him to the study, Richard Blackwood's former domain. Graham sat heavily in one of the leather chairs, his usual composure completely gone. The FBI came to see me today, he said, about the trust, about Vivian's activities. And they asked if I knew about the offshore accounts, about the money transfers. He looked up at me with haunted eyes. I told them the truth, that I suspected something was wrong but didn't have proof. That was smart. Was it? Because now they're asking about you, about how you knew so much, about how you obtained all that evidence. I poured myself a scotch from Richard's bar. What did you tell them? That Richard Blackwood was a thorough man who kept detailed records, that he suspected his daughter was stealing from the trust and took steps to protect his assets. Graham accepted a glass with shaking hands. It's the truth, mostly. Mostly is good enough. Is it? Because if they dig deeper, if they find out about the $5 million Richard left you, they'll find out that a grateful father-in-law left money to the son-in-law who helped him build his business. And nothing illegal about that. Graham nodded slowly. You planned this entire thing, didn't you? From the moment Richard died, you knew this day would come. Richard knew his daughter better than anyone. He knew what she was capable of, what she would eventually do. I sipped my scotch. He just made sure I had the tools to stop her when the time came. And Blake was a predator who got careless. He would have been caught eventually. I just made sure it happened sooner rather than later. Graham finished his drink and stood up. I've been the Blackwood family lawyer for 30 years. I've seen 3 generations of that family rise and fall, but I've never seen anything like this. Like what? Like watching someone systematically dismantle everything they'd built, using nothing but patience and intelligence. He shook his head. You're a dangerous man, Elliot Parrish, only to people who threaten me and mine. After Graham left, I walked out onto the balcony and looked down at the crowd still gathered in the street below. Some were reporters, but most were just neighbors and townspeople, drawn by the spectacle of seeing the mighty brought low. A movement caught my eye, a figure trying to push through the crowd, shouting something I couldn't hear. As the person got closer, I recognized Sophie, Vivian's former best friend. She was drunk, disheveled, and clearly distraught. Elliot! She screamed up at me. You destroyed her! You destroyed everything! The crowd turned to look up at me, cameras flashing. This was my moment, my chance to address not just Sophie, but everyone who had ever doubted me. I didn't destroy anything, I called down, my voice carrying clearly in the night air. I simply revealed what was already there, the lies, the theft, the betrayal. None of that was my doing. She loved you, Sophie sobbed. She made mistakes, but she loved you. Love? I laughed, the sound echoing off the mansion's walls. She loved my money, my connections, my usefulness, but she never loved me. If she had, none of this would have happened. You're a monster! No, I said, looking down at the crowd of upturned faces. I'm just a man who refused to be a victim. The crowd began to disperse after that, the excitement of the day finally winding down. Sophie was led away by friends, still crying and cursing my name. I remained on the balcony for a long time, thinking about the journey that had brought me to this moment. 20 years ago, I'd been a young construction worker who'd fallen in love with a beautiful, sophisticated woman. I thought I was lucky to win her, grateful to be accepted into her world. Now I understood the truth. She had needed me more than I had needed her. My work ethic, my business sense, my ability to build something from nothing had been essential to maintaining the lifestyle she craved. But she had never seen my value, never appreciated what I brought to our partnership. Her loss. Tomorrow, I would begin the process of rebuilding my life. The construction company would continue to grow. The Harbor Light would remain a gathering place for real people with real problems. And I would find new ways to contribute to the community that had supported me through this ordeal. But tonight, I was content to stand on my balcony, master of my own domain once again, and savor the sweet taste of justice served. The house had always had a pest problem, I reflected, but I'd finally cleared it out. A cool breeze stirred the night air, carrying with it the scent of possibility and new beginnings. In the distance, I could see the lights of the Harbor Light, where Sharon would be closing up for the night, probably still smiling about the day's events. My phone buzzed with a text message from Mick. Drinks tomorrow to celebrate? I typed back, absolutely, we have a lot to celebrate. And we did. Justice had been served, the truth had been revealed, and the people who had tried to destroy me were now facing the consequences of their actions. It had taken patience, planning, and a willingness to play a longer game than my enemies had expected, but in the end, the blue-collar kid who'd married into money and respectability had proven that intelligence and determination were more powerful than inherited wealth and social connections. I raised my glass to the night sky, toasting the memory of Richard Blackwood, who had seen this day coming and given me the tools to make it happen. "Thank you," I whispered to the darkness. Then I went inside, locked the door, and began planning my new life as a free man.